Hello, I'm Justin Bonnet, a member of our great Forest Lake community. The Forest Lake Times recently reported on the school board's approval of $1.7 million in cuts to the district. An additional $300,000 in cuts will come next month. These cuts, which follow $5.5 million in cuts made over the last 3 years, catalyzed a torrent of comments on the Times Facebook page. I want to take a moment to summarize and respond to the conversation. In case you find my comments long-winded or boring, I'm providing a choice of attention holders. There are baby animals, monster truck crashes, ballet dancers, and highlights from the 1987 World Series. If that doesn't keep you awake, I decided to wear this beautifully loud shirt that my son just gave me. When adjusted for inflation, per pupil funding from the state is over $2,500 less than it was in 1992. As a result, local communities need to shoulder more of the burden, which is why districts ask for per pupil money in the form of levies. Last year, 61 districts from across the state asked for more per pupil funding from their communities. All but 11 communities granted that request. Our community, with only 30% of eligible voters deciding, is one that did not. Currently, our community provides $462 in per pupil funding, which is well below the state average. The district had asked for $750 additional dollars per student. Our district is lowest among comparable area school districts. Had we approved our levy, we would be in about the middle. We as a community have not increased our per pupil funding in 11 years. The state has made small increases, but, as already mentioned, these increases have not even come close to keeping up with inflation. Ultimately, the Facebook discussion centers on whether or not we as a community should provide greater per pupil funding to the district. While the majority of comments are in favor of greater funding, a vocal minority argues that funding is not a problem. Much of these arguments pit worker against worker. With wages being 60.7% and benefits being 22.7% of the budget, the problem is that, as Joe points out, teachers need pensions and health care and half a year off. I'm an educator. Before joining the faculty of St. Paul College, I spent 10 years teaching middle and high school English. When I started teaching, I'd arrive in my classroom by 6:45 a.m. and didn't leave before 5, and rarely did not eat lunch while sitting at my desk working. Then there were professional development days, parent-teacher conferences, open house nights, and orientations. I'd spend 2 weeks preparing for school before it started, much of my vacations grading, and a week at the end of the year packing up my classroom and finalizing grades. When I started having children, I'd leave earlier, but I'd work after my kids went to bed, and I'd squeeze prep time and grading time into my weekends. All in all, I worked as many hours in a year as I would have in any profession outside of education. In case any of you are starting to fade, here are some battles depicted in movies, romantic scenes, holes in one, and happy moments. Now, while some blame teachers for the district's budget challenges, others in the conversation blame the administrators who are overpaid and not in the trenches. The Times article cites that by cutting one assistant principal, the district will save $150,000. Of course, that includes benefits. An assistant principal does not take home $150,000. Still, some consider that too much. Take into account the training, though. On top of a bachelor's degree, a teaching license, and a master's degree, an assistant principal needs a principal's license, which typically takes an additional 2 years. Furthermore, assistant principals have a myriad of managerial responsibilities. They are in the trenches, right along with the teachers, but they are much bigger targets. I love teaching and I'm good at what I do, but I do not have the skill set nor the guts to step into the shoes of an assistant principal. Those with similar skill sets and levels of responsibilities, and those who come under as much fire in other industries, are typically compensated just as well, if not better. The fact is that in order to attract and retain talented leaders, school districts have to pay administrators competitive salaries. I've worked under both good and bad administrators. The good ones are worth every penny. Matthew does not question how hard school administrators work or perpetuate the divisive myth that they work only 9 months a year. Instead, he respectfully compares a hard-working assistant principal's salary to that of a hard-working plumber's salary, pointing out that if Joe the plumber works 60 hours a week for $60,000 a year and Phil the assistant principal works 60 hours a week for $150,000, you can see why Joe would be astonished. I too believe that highly skilled, talented workers in every profession deserve fair compensation. So let's take a quick look at Joe. An intelligent, motivated, and hardworking young man who just graduated from high school. He goes to St. Paul College for a plumbing diploma and becomes an apprentice plumber. He starts out making $15 an hour, but jumps to $20 in just over a year. At age 25, Joe becomes a journeyman plumber and makes $50,000. Phil, by the way, is in his second year of teaching and making $35,000. While still in his 20s, Joe is an experienced journeyman plumber, making $66,000. At age 35, Phil is hired by MSP Plumbing, Heating, and Air. In the meantime, Phil has paid off his $20,000 undergraduate degree loan, has taken out an additional $15,000 in loans for his master's degree, and has paid $15,000 out of pocket for a principal's license. It'll be another 5 years of taking on additional leadership roles at his school before he has the experience needed to be hired as an assistant principal. Up until that point, Phil has earned approximately $900,000 pre-tax dollars and has paid about $80,000 in educational expenses. Joe has made approximately $1,400,000 and has paid $8,000 in educational and licensing fees. Both men will deservedly retire comfortably, but Joe will retire earlier. His significantly better salary early in his career allowed him to live more comfortably in his 20s and 30s, buy a house sooner than Phil, and put more into savings. Furthermore, nobody has ever made Joe defend himself for what he has earned. Although my comparison is of course fictional, it is realistic. 10 years ago, a Roto-Rooter spokesman noted that a good plumber can pretty much write his ticket and make in excess of $100,000 a year in a market that resists recessions. Another scapegoat for our district's budget challenges is mismanagement. This catchphrase is ambiguous to say the least. What exactly is being mismanaged? Where's the proof? Are too many copies being made? Are too many staples being used? Education, like most other professions, evolves. Educators are faced with new laws and constantly changing demands. Do people assume that schools are being mismanaged because they are different than these people remember? If you believe there is mismanagement, locate it and question it. Go to the school board and have your specific concerns addressed. Perhaps the responses you receive will change your perception. If you are not satisfied, run for the school board. Become an expert on our district and how it is managed, and with that expertise, make the changes needed for it to be better managed. Unfortunately, many residents with children have moved or are considering moving because of our district's lack of funding. I don't have specific data, but I can safely say that family spending helps drive local business success. Personally, most of the money my family spends is within the boundaries of the Forest Lake School District. Attracting and retaining families helps established businesses grow. It encourages new businesses to come. Jobs are created, money is spent, businesses grow. Private business and publicly funded schools do not work against each other. For those of you who are disheartened by the district's inadequate funding and the divisive comments against our public school system, please note that most of the comments come from people who share your beliefs and support our school system as much as you do. It's our job to not stoop to divisiveness, to acknowledge and understand valid arguments that do not support our goals, and to inform those who need to be informed.